Okay. I want to introduce our panel. Doug Morton is our corporate secretary for South Carolina Emerging Technology Association. He's also, my technical advisor for South Carolina Blockchain, our public benefit corporation. Doug seems to get a lot more done than I do. Just on a on an email on a electronic basis. Needless to say, but couldn't have done this without him. So I want to take an opportunity to mention him again. Paola is with the Department of Rural Health. We've had the opportunity, to travel to El Salvador together. Instrumental in our ability to communicate, quite frankly. But also, the originator of the digital economy ecosystem in South Carolina, which is a USDA-funded grant program that she's created through, the Office of Rural Health and targeting rural communities in South Carolina for job creation in a digital economy. Boyce is a venture capital family office, former Microsoft executive and. Involved in a level of relief efforts in the Ukraine now. Part of the lessons that we're learning also from Ukraine. Although we're focusing on El Salvador, there are lots of applications for what's going on right now, in other parts of the world, and we're just pleased to have Mark with that level of experience bringing it into what we're doing in South Carolina as well. So I'm just going to hand it off and maybe start with Mark, and work this way. On your impressions of our delegation trip to El Salvador.
Is the microphone working? Yes. I liked how Curtis began his talk earlier today. He began it with a story, so I'm going to start mine with a story. When we were with some of the students in vocational schools who were taking a Bitcoin education class, one observation that came out in some of our discussions is that having a wallet and being able to experience for the first time having some access to what is a bank had a profound impact on their life. And that impact was in the form of hope. And hope is very important. And it relates to something else, time frame. Everybody in this room has an understanding of time and planning. But in many communities that are more vulnerable, including in the U.S., having a time frame for discipline and planning and having a future is not something that people have. And that was really obvious in terms of the impact in transportation. And I think Paul will have some comments about that as well. Two more observations. Meeting someone like Paul, who brings incredible leadership and to the country and is very innovative. And thirdly, and then I'll stop, I love underdogs. I like Ukraine, it's an underdog, and I like El Salvador. It's an underdog. Underdogs are not sometimes well understood. And what I mean by that is if it was 1903 right here, we were in 1903, the car had been invented in 1896. And we were complaining that only a small fraction of Americans were using cars. That would not be a good reflection to have on the state of innovation. So El Salvador was first in many areas. And I think it's something to be applauded and respected. And that's why I was really enthusiastic about the time in El Salvador. So let me stop.
Mark, thank you. I'll let Paula continue. I want to take a moment to welcome Secretary Steiner to the panel.
Thank you.
So this will be death by storytelling, I suppose. I also have a story. It's the tale of two women. And so this is directly related to comparing my experience in El Salvador to my experience here in South Carolina. So before coming over here to Charleston, I stopped by the post office. And there was a woman behind me, and she was so apologetic about having to keep up the line. And the story goes that she went to the bank for her son, cashed a check. She had to deposit the money in a different bank. The bank told her she could not deposit the $3,000, and they sent her to the post office. and she had to pay $6 and such for the money order in order to go back to the bank and make that deposit. And going backwards to about a month or so ago, in El Salvador, my trusted driver, also a woman, she needed to take care of a transaction, which was me paying her for some eardrops that I asked her to get for me. And being used to this system of having to get money out of the ATM or going to an exchange house, I said, how do I pay you? She said, well, do you have a Moon wallet? I was like, no, I don't have a Moon wallet, but I'll download it right now. I downloaded my Moon wallet, and she shared with me her QR code, and I instantly sent her the money. So convenience. That is my main takeaway with my experience of El Salvador, and also comparing it to what it could be for women like the one I met a few days ago at the post office in South Carolina.
Right. Obviously, individual vignettes like this are what's so important to understand what happens. And I'll just inject real quickly with some of the work that we've done in the state. There's one of the utility companies in the rural areas that Paola is working in has one of the largest cash deposits in the country. People that are unbanked in that marketplace. And so, we look for applications. Sometimes they're right around the corner. Hand it off to Doug.
My experience with El Salvador, I've been there twice now in the past couple of months. I would consider it life-changing in terms of changing my perspective. And I've been trying to promote everything that I'm learning about El Salvador out into the media, out into Twitter, and correlate it with what we're trying to do here in South Carolina, because we've kind of got this vibe going where what we're doing in South Carolina overlays what we're doing in El Salvador. And it's basically about education. And so we met with government officials, we met with educators, and we met with students and people out in the street. And one of the things that I took away from El Salvador is that there is a very large feeling of hope for the future because they're cleaning up the gangs, they're educating their students. Students are seeing hope for their future that they had none before. They were more just thinking about living for the next day. And now they're actually looking to the future for what their skill set is going to be able to provide them, what they're going to be able to provide for their family, safety that they're going to be able to have, instead of walking out in the street thinking they're going to get, demanded for protection money just to go back home. And it's overwhelming. You go there and see that there's so much pride in a culture that is warm and giving and caring, and the overwhelming sense of hope is what I got from it.
Well, and I can certainly echo that. Our first trip, we were planning this conference, and after the first trip, we came back and said, we got to change the whole thing. So and the second trip changed it even further at that point. So I'll hand it off to Mr. Steiner. Paul Steiner is the Director of Micro and Small Business in El Salvador. We are honored with his presence, and certainly gracious as a host, and showing us some of the things that we may not have seen in El Salvador, but going into some of the details of what the challenges are there.
Well, I'm really honored to be here, and thank you for inviting me. Really, it's rare occasion that we get a chance to go out and tell your story to people who haven't heard it, or are constantly hearing a story that isn't true. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity to come and tell you that story. But while we're on the death by storytelling, if I may, I'd just like to tell you about a lady I know in El Salvador. She's basically a self-employed. She has a spot in two markets, one in Sonsonate, which is in the northern end of the country, and another one in San Salvador, both in markets. Her elder daughter looks after the spot in the basket, which is what it is. She sells from a basket in Sonsonate, and her younger daughter sleeps under the basket in San Salvador because she's too young. And this lady has, her name's Judith, and she sells about $1,000 a month. And she's now 42, 43, has no pension scheme because obviously she's been self-employed, informal, so she's not been contributing to a pension scheme. And if she started today, she would not be able to retire at 55, which is the age in Salvador for women, because she wouldn't have contributed enough time for that. There's a minimum 20-year contribution period. And she has loans from ushers as her only means of getting financed for her business. And she has a $4,000 loan. More than 100% of it is guaranteed by jewelry that she's purchased along the way. And so she's got more than $4,000 of guarantee on that loan. But she pays $640 a month interest. I pause there because I think it takes a little bit of time to do the math and realize that with $360 a month left, she doesn't have enough to feed her family, clothe them, or buy more merchandise for her stalls. And so that loan probably started at $200 some time ago, and then every month she adds on because it's not enough to survive. And like that, there are probably another 800,000 self-employed people in El Salvador who live the day charging what they can to dine at night. And that's literally the subsistence circle. Well, there's a good ending to this story because a Bitcoin investor came shortly after the coin was made legal tender in El Salvador. And he said, look, I've got a DAO that we're capable of putting a fund together. I've set up a company here to represent the DAO in El Salvador, and they will send me Bitcoin. I will loan this Bitcoin to this sort of people, and instead of charging them the huge extortionate interest rate that the ushers do, I will replace that $4,000 loan with the equivalent in Bitcoin at 25% per annum. Now here we would probably say, well, 25% per annum is pretty much usher interest anyhow. But for her, that is a tremendous relief. She pays $3 a day. You see the difference? $157 a month is what it works out at. Now that's created $500 of liquidity in her pocket. And I don't know about you, but have you ever heard of a bank here in the States making 25% interest per annum or charging that? Well, you were telling me about some a long time ago on the 18%, but 25%.
There's a term for that.
But 25% per annum is a pretty good return on a fund. Those of you that have got a 401k, start asking yourself, what am I getting in return every year? And it's certainly not close to 25%. Now, if you start looking at it from that point of view, there's a tremendous life-changing opportunity that's growing in El Salvador to help transform the lives of people just by charging them a fairer interest to what they're getting right now. But what a huge investment opportunity that is. So you could even huddle on Nexo. Nexo, is it? Is it called Nexus, Nexo? And they'll give it to you in dollars, and you lend it in dollars. And just loan 10% of what they give you at 0% interest from your own Bitcoin and start earning 25% on that 10% per annum. Just think of the business opportunities there are if you want to do it on a small basis. Now, if you want to do it on a bigger basis, that's where things are starting to get really interesting. And just like that, there are a number of tremendous opportunities where a huge investment opportunity for you, but a tremendous life-changing opportunity for a huge amount of people. And that's really the story I come to tell about Salvador, because the order of magnitude is impressive. A tiny little bit here is a huge amount in El Salvador. And you'll notice it just in the cost of food, for example. everything is a totally different order. So I encourage you to consider a trip out there, even if you just want a vacation. But understand what a 2.5-hour flight will bring you into a Jurassic economy that is changing, that is evolving rapidly. And I don't mean Costa Rica or Cocos Island. I'm literally talking about an economy that's coming out of the dark ages. It's 3 years into its journey, and it's turning around tremendously. We had a 10.3% growth in our GDP last year. Never has it ever been above 3. We have 36% increased exports last year over 2020. Okay, 2020 was a bad year, but it's still 19% over 2019, and that wasn't a bad year. And this year, we're 17% ahead of last year. So the economy is growing. And one of the beauties of that export side is that it's made up of, the increase is made up of 200 new exporting companies, and they're all small. In fact, the export, the winner of the export prize in El Salvador was a small company. And I was really, really proud to hand that prize to him, because really that's what it's about. That 97% of all the companies in El Salvador are small and micro and one-man bands. So you can see the order of magnitude in terms of big and medium. And so there's a tremendous opportunity there, and I'm sorry I'm taking so much time.
No, I want to actually dovetail into that with just a question to to Mark and Doug. We had the opportunity to visit a neobank, Ditto Banks, which is basically a bank built on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
In El Salvador.
And it's a Salvadoran company.
Yeah, and a Salvadoran company. Yes, exactly. So perhaps Doug and Mark, if you could just kind of opine on that a little.
Yeah, and I want to tie it to your interests, also. Look, so now we're sort of shifting in to the innovation story in El Salvador for the kinds of small companies. And emerging companies have a cost structure, right? There's less risk in a way in investing in El Salvador in a company because your cost basis is going to be lower than it is in the US. And yet you're going to see, in many cases, greater innovation. And innovation is what drives change. So in terms of your question, Dennis, for those of you that did miss Paul last night speaking, $6 billion in remittances come from the US to El Salvador. And Ditto Banks has a gift card. You can put cash onto it. There, when I get a haircut in South Carolina, I only go to Hispanic and Latino places to get it cut, so I can practice Spanish. That is an interesting, aspect of innovation. I would encourage you to hear Paola at 4:10 today on healthcare, which is not a healthcare panel, but we're going to talk about the relationship between the underbanked and healthcare and rural South Carolina residents and healthcare in El Salvador. How do these things relate? Lastly, and I'm going to let Doug speak to this, are innovations with the Lightning Network. By the way, how many here know what time zone El Salvador is on? Only a few. It's Central Time, and it's easy. It's like flying to Denver. So it's an easy flight. You'll see the innovative companies that Paul knows many of these, and there are ideas there that will help you in your own business. Let me stop. Doug?
Yeah, I was trying to think about this over the past couple days of why Dennis and I and SCIDA, the parent organization of this conference, was focusing on El Salvador, other than the easy of they legalized Bitcoin. And it ended up a much deeper thought because we overlay so many different things that they're trying to do in El Salvador for what we're trying to do here, which is empowerment, education, financial literacy, and economic development. And we found that we have such a symbiotic relationship, basically, of what they're trying to do and giving the innovation to the one person, the one-man band, small business, micro business, trying to bring in investment. is the same thing we're trying to do here, and we can build those synergies because we can bring innovation, we can bring money from outside. They desperately need it. They need to bring production into the country. We can do the same thing here, build our infrastructure more in South Carolina and in the United States, and pass the technology and the money back and forth with growing economic development in both locations. And my point of view with the Lightning Network, with the instant settlement of payments, hinges more on what Paul's talking about with the diaspora, the El Salvadorans that are in the United States, trying to get money from here to there at the least cost possible. So if they're going to send $50 with Western Union, it's going to be at least $10 fee. That's 20% of their money that they're trying to send for $50, where you can send Bitcoin Lightning instantly for pennies, if that. And so I know from my point of view, I'm trying to push that remittance to make it easy, and we can build all that infrastructure on this side to help them on their side and build this relationship.
I do want to touch on the health issues, because Paola had firsthand experience, with the healthcare system in El Salvador. It was late. I mean, there was emergency service. It turned out that you needed a specialist. Perhaps you could just talk about that a little bit, and because I mean, obviously there is a level of I guess medical tourism, that may be developed. So we've only got a few minutes, but we'll go ahead and hand it off.
Sure. So I had a ear infection, and it just got worse and worse. And so I thought I need to go to the emergency room, and I did. And it was the most seamless process I ever experienced. To be honest, I've never been to the emergency room in the U.S., and I'm very glad. So just take a stab. How much did it cost for me to go to the emergency room in El Salvador? Sorry? $5. $25. And I actually saw the doctor, and she got a specialist because it was so acute, the issue. But yes, it was an amazing experience. And then afterwards, I had to ask another question. Already in the U.S., I called the hospital, and I got the physician on the phone. The physician on the phone. It wasn't someone else. It was the physician on the phone talking to me. And it was just wild. But you hit the nail on the head. Medical tourism. When I was there, I thought, this was on Saturday night, and I thought, I'm going to go back on Monday and do like a full scan of everything. No, really, I thought about that. And then someone else I was talking to yesterday said, I wanted to do that too. And I went to, there is, my family is Colombian, and there's a lot of medical tourism and like aesthetics, all these things. And I thought, when we were talking about tourism and how many people are investing in El Salvador, I thought, maybe we should look into some sort of, medical tourism around this, that, or the other. But yes, I think El Salvador right now, with the growth and the safety, the possibilities, I think, are endless. I know I would want to go back. I'm already talking to a cousin, thinking about what we could do going there. That's a whole other story. But yes, I highly encourage you to go. Don't think about it twice. It's like Doug and everyone was saying, it's a beautiful country, warm people, and there's a desire just to go and then return.
And the flip side of that is in places like El Zante, Bitcoin Beach, there is no medical clinic. There's no dental clinic. That is actually being now challenged by Bitcoiners. One of whom we met in Austin at BitBlock Boom, and retired dentist couple, and they are opening a dental clinic in El Zante. This is just grassroots stuff, quite frankly, and as a result of their efforts, they'll be bringing in a medical clinic. So, but now here you have an opportunity where they're about an hour away from good health care, pure and simple. It's not as though it doesn't exist, but it's just not there to the local population. So, just as an example, there's so many examples, obviously, of where there are opportunities in El Salvador, with the changing landscape and the economics there. encourage a visit. Certainly, use Lightning Network. BitDriver will pick you up. He was an Uber driver who went into business for himself, and prefers Bitcoin. So that's what it's all about. So, any questions? Well, if we have a minute more, how are we doing? Oh, we're over. Okay. I want to thank the panel. I want to thank Paul Steiner. I want to thank everybody here for joining us today. And I think we're about to move into the final panel,
Yes.
for the morning and then lunch, which I do want to make sure that we mention our lunch sponsor, Nephron Pharmaceuticals. And without them, yes.
Quick
Greg?
question. I'm just curious, enamored with the El Salvador story as it continues to unfold. How do other states and councils support you in your effort and what's going on?
Doug?
Well, we do talk to other state associations, but pretty much I would say that we are on our own in terms of what we're doing with our outreach. But we do share information. So we've got various groups through the Southeast, out in Washington State, Texas, where we do share information. So we're sharing our wins, we're sharing our losses, but everybody has a different goal. And I'm kind of thinking Mr. Steiner may touch on this later today about we need to come up together a lot better to organize, to put a better voice out there, for sure.
And, I mean, there are roughly, I believe, 18 state associations now that are in some level of formation. Obviously, we got an early start. We just did get our 501c6 designation in August after a year's application. So, that's great news. We just learned it the other day. Apparently, the letter got kind of buried somewhere. So it did coincide great with the timing here. So, obviously supporting your state association, building a state association if you don't already have one, it's all part of the mix. And and I think we're all trying to discover our place at the table, and also the collective voice of the organization of state associations that that's being started out in Washington State. That's a very important aspect of it, and really moving in lockstep on what is the policy for this industry, so that we are speaking with a concerted voice, and that understanding the benefits of how your state actually gets things done. In South Carolina, what I've discovered through this trek is that South Carolina is a small state. It's an hour and a half from Columbia. Every point in the area. I mean, a lot of political strategies are brought here, tested here, because it's just less expensive, pure and simple. So for the Bitcoin policy group and other folks that want to lobby our congressional folks, I mean, we've got Tim Scott, who is the, upon re-election, looks pretty good. He'll be the Senate Banking Committee chair. That's a big position. Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming will be moving into a seniority position. So, taking Senator Scott, hopefully from from what we know now, passive supporter, to an active supporter, is something we could do right here through South Carolina with the other state associations, and that's why it's so important we have Dennis Porter here representing the Satoshi Action Fund, our mining group, and all of those policy issues are where we really want to start directing our efforts. So, obviously joining SCITA, being part of that program, if we can put out when we start putting out a bulletin, we want the phone to ring in a congressional office before 10 o'clock at least 5 times. That gets people's attention, pure and simple. So, thank you all very much.